Hi, my name is Cameron Hughes. I am presenting the best practices for the online language classroom, and this is for EAD524. So to start off, I will define what a best practice is. As David Arundel states on his website, the term best practice has become convoluted over time. The term itself has over 300 million Google results, and adding in the word definition hardly narrows the results down any further. Arundel defines the best education practices as the wide range of individual activities, policies, and programmatic approaches to achieving positive changes in student attitudes or academic behaviors. Best practices are also context-specific. These particular activities, policies, and programmatic approaches will only successfully change student attitudes and academic behaviors if applied in certain contexts. For example, if a student is taking an in-person English language learning class, is the best education practice digital literacy, or are there other practices that are more fitting? I believe it's the latter. For this reason, I am focusing on online language teaching and the best practices that should be implemented into that particular environment. The few best practices I am presenting are as follows. Both student culture and creative culture are relevant in the classroom. Focus not only on language literacy, but digital literacy too, and communication is key and encouraged. So for the first practice, both student culture and creative culture are relevant in the classroom. Students, especially those in an English language learning classroom, will all come into the classroom with their own culture, experiences, and perceptions of the world. All of these should be taken into account when planning lessons, deciding on appropriate content, creating visuals, and more. Culture should also be taken into account in how students respond to the material and to the instructor. For example, students from Japan will perhaps ask less questions than students from Spain. This hot pot of cultures will then interact and simmer, eventually creating their own classroom culture. By integrating students' cultures into the background, By integrating students' cultures into the material, students will then be able to connect with the material easier. As an example, in Gunawardena and Jung, learners from high-context cultures benefit from having graphics and visuals presented with little details. However, those who come from low-context cultures tend to need information explicitly displayed. If an instructor takes a student's culture into account, they can then pick the appropriate visuals accordingly. Also stated in Gunawardena and Jung, students can use their culture as a means of bonding and shared experience, which creates a tight community of practice. This transformational learning allows for students to bond over shared experiences that can even cross cultures. This kind of bond creates a safe learning environment, especially when it comes to language learning. Furthermore, classes that are online, especially those that are language classes, require students to focus on communicative learning. Due to relying less on facial cues and mouth movements, paying attention to class culture leads to a safe language learning space in which communicative learning can take place, while also allowing for students to synthesize material easier. The most glaring limitation I have deduced surrounds highly diverse and multicultural classrooms, a common occurrence in language learning. How does an instructor meet the needs of all students? The case studies presented in Culture and Online Learning by Gunawardena and Jung mainly center around a homogeneous culture and even make a point to mention a lack of multicultural studies. Is making students adapt to high-context learning if they're from a low-context culture, or vice versa, a lesson in itself? This is a question I find hard to answer. The instructor in me that aims for equity across the board to allow for students to be successful wants to appeal to all cultures. But how feasible is that? The second best practice is focus not only on language literacy, but digital literacy too. As presented on U.S. Digital Literacy's site, the definition of literacy has evolved. As they state, literacy used to mean reading and writing. It still does. However, literacy has evolved in a term that means three more things regarding digital literacy. The ability to use digital technology, communication tools, or networks to locate, evaluate, use, and create information. The ability to understand and use information in multiple formats from a wide range of sources when it is presented via computers. A person's ability to perform tasks effectively in a digital environment. Literacy includes the ability to read and interpret media, to reproduce data and images through digital manipulation, and to evaluate and apply new knowledge gained from digital environments. I would also add to this that being digitally literate means one understands how to be safe on the internet and to use the internet and technology with caution. As a best practice, an instructor should focus on language literacy of the language they are teaching, but also assist students in navigating the internet in the target language or navigating the internet in general if students have never used it before. Focusing on digital literacy also extends to instructors as well, and instructors should be well versed in any technology they implement into their classroom or ask their students to use within the classroom. Becoming digitally literate opens up many new doors to learners. In a paper written by Yuxler and Japan, they bring up how tools such as Moodle, a digital resource, can be used to aid students in their journey to learn English. With that said, the authors also mention how instructors also feel pressured to incorporate more digital tools to meet the digital needs of their students. Furthermore, digital literacy is a skill that will be useful outside of the language learning classroom. With the younger generation already being dubbed digital natives, a need to understand technology and Web 2 is as important as ever. As discovered in the study by Yuxler and Japan, English language students themselves found that digital literacy is an essential skill for participating in technology-integrated language teaching methods. Digital literacy is the gateway for online classes. Furthermore, being digitally literate or having digital skills eases up tasks in the digital environment. If students already understand what information to take and synthesize on the internet, there's less worry if something is an all-right source to use in a paper. Accessing videos, figuring out databases, and just generally navigating the internet becomes infinitely easier with a solid digital literate background. The biggest hurdle I can see to overcoming digital literacy is in regards to resources. Do students have access to computers, or are they taking class on their phone? What kind of digital literacy should we be focused on? A colleague of mine in my TESOL class mentioned that many refugees in an English language class she observed would use the video camera on their phone, and that was all the technology they had access to. In this scenario, is it important for students to understand how to use a computer if they don't own one, but they might own one in the future? Furthermore, instructors should also be familiar with the technology they use in their class. If an instructor cannot explain the technology they use, it may just lead to more confusion among students who are already investing time and energy into studying another language. And best practice 3, communication is key and should be encouraged. To communicate is to exchange information, ideas, or news. In regards to this particular practice, communication between the instructor and the students is what is important. Clear and precise instructions, as well as timely responses, all aim to make a digital classroom run smoothly. In Chong, Hurst, and McLean, it is stated that students participate in online classes due to the flexibility of said classes. There's an appeal to learning anytime and anywhere. Due to its inherent nature, however, online classes are often asynchronous, especially in regards to student and instructor communication. However, with the digital age, this is easily solved through the use of email, announcement posts on the learning site of choice. It can even extend to social media outlets such as Twitter. In a language learning classroom where misunderstanding the materials can stunt a student's scaffolding, communication is even more key. To have an effective digital language learning classroom is not dissimilar to having an effective in-person language learning classroom. Instructions need to be printed clearly for students in language that is understandable to them, as presented by Tomlinson and Masuhara. The instructor should be available as a resource, and students need to be given time to interact with each other. It is important for instructors to be available often to answer student questions or present the students with timeframes when they will always be available, such as online office hours. This way, students aren't left wondering if they're doing an assignment incorrectly or understanding a grammar point incorrectly. It is difficult adjusting to online classes and losing face-to-face chances to ask questions, and you're also losing that accountability. And being able to mitigate unsureness in students will allow for learning to continue smoothly. Furthermore, if instructors are responsive and reciprocate interest in student learning, students will be less hesitant to ask and reach out when they need help. However, that may not always be the case, and as stated earlier, some cultures and people may ask more questions than others, even if they are confused. That is why presenting clear instructions and perhaps responding to a single student's question with an announcement post so all students can see the answer is important. Not all students will take the initiative or feel comfortable asking the instructor questions. Regarding barriers for communication, professors and instructors are busy. They will not always be able to answer every time students need their help. That is the unfortunate drawback of online classes, but that is also just a general drawback of class in general. Students may also not have access to the internet when a question they have arises, or they may only be able to access the internet a certain amount of times a week. In a language learning classroom, students may also not be able to fully translate what their question is, and without the use of body language and language charades, there may be a failure in communication. The vice versa can happen as well. Students may not be able to understand the instructor's response. And here is my references. And those are my best practices in the online language classroom. Thank you for watching.